The beeping of machines filled the sterile air, each sound a reminder that time was running out. Nora Tate sat motionless beside her daughter's hospital bed, her fingers trembling as they brushed a strand of dark hair from 6-year-old Leia's damp forehead. The child's skin, once golden with health, was pale now, almost translucent beneath the harsh fluorescent light. Tubes and wires surrounded her small body, connecting her to the cold rhythm of survival. Then came the whisper, soft, fragile, and far too knowing for someone so young. "Mama," Leia said, her voice cracking like thin glass. "I can hear my heart breaking." The words sliced through Nora's chest, sharper than any scalpel, crueler than any diagnosis. She tried to smile, but her lips shook. "No, baby," she whispered, forcing steadiness she didn't feel. "Your heart is strong. It's just tired tonight, that's all." But Leia shook her head weakly, her tiny fingers clutching her mother's hand. "It's not just the sick part, Mama. It's the lonely part, too." Nora's throat tightened. She had no answer for that. For 6 long years, she had tried to be everything: a mother, a father, a nurse, a shield against the world. Every dawn she scrubbed office floors. Every afternoon she served lunches to strangers who never learned her name. Every night she stocked grocery shelves while her daughter slept in the hospital, all to keep hope alive. But tonight, hope felt impossibly far away. "Mama," Leia whispered again, her lashes fluttering against her pale cheeks. "The other kids here, they have daddies. They come and tell stories and bring balloons. Even Sammy in the next room has one. He laughs so much when his daddy's here." Her eyes glistened with tears she was too tired to shed. "What does it feel like when a daddy loves you?" Nora's breath caught in her chest. She wanted to lie, to invent a story bright enough to fill the void, but no story could hide the truth. Leia's father had left before she could even remember his face. A note. 23 words. "I can't do this. I'm not ready. Don't try to find me." She had spent years pretending those words didn't define them, that her daughter would never feel that absence. But now, sitting in this cold white room, her little girl was asking for something Nora could never give. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said finally, her voice breaking. "But I think it must feel safe, like someone catching you when you fall." "I want that," Leia said simply. "Just once, before I go to sleep forever." Nora couldn't breathe. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as silent sobs escaped. How do you tell a dying child that love sometimes fails, that some hearts are too selfish to stay? When she looked up again, Leia had turned her face toward the window, staring out at the city lights that shimmered against the night. "Maybe there's someone out there who could pretend," Leia murmured. "Just for a little while." Nora reached out, touching her daughter's small hand. "Pretend? So I can know what it feels like," Leia whispered, her eyes already closing. Long after her daughter drifted into uneasy sleep, Nora sat frozen, the words echoing through her mind. Someone who could pretend. The idea was madness, but desperation makes its own kind of logic. The hospital hallway outside was quiet now, filled only with the distant hum of night shift machines and the echo of footsteps. She stood and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The parking lot below shimmered with the reflection of rain-slick pavement and fluorescent lights. People came and went, living their ordinary lives while hers was quietly falling apart. And then she saw him. A man stood near the valet station, tall and composed in a coal suit that caught the glow of the overhead lamps. He checked his phone, his movements precise, deliberate. There was something about the way he carried himself. Strength without arrogance, calm without indifference, the kind of man who seemed untouched by the chaos of the world. For a moment, Nora could only stare. He looked like everything her daughter dreamed of. Someone strong enough to lift her into the air, kind enough to make her laugh, steady enough to make her believe she wasn't alone. Her pulse quickened, her mind screamed, "Don't be ridiculous," but her heart whispered something else. What if he's the answer? Down below, the stranger pocketed his phone and turned toward the hospital entrance. Nora's breath caught. The world narrowed to that single figure in the rain, and in that instant, she knew her life was about to change. Because when a mother is out of miracles, she looks for one in human form. And tonight, Nora Tate had just found hers. The rain had started to fall by the time Nora reached the lobby, her heart pounding louder than the thunder outside. She told herself to stop, to think, to remember that she was about to do something no sane person would ever consider, but sanity was a luxury she could no longer afford. Her daughter was dying, and she had run out of miracles. The revolving door spun once, twice, and then he appeared again, stepping inside, shaking the rain from his coat. He was taller, up close, broad-shouldered with an air of quiet command that drew every eye in the room. His suit was perfectly tailored, his tie undone just enough to reveal that even control had its cracks. Nora's throat went dry. He looked like someone who had never known fear, never begged for help, never lost everything. Before her courage could collapse, she moved toward him. "Excuse me?" The words trembled out of her. He turned at the sound, his eyes the color of storm clouds meeting hers with polite curiosity. "Yes," he said, his voice deep, calm, and unhurried. For a moment Nora couldn't speak. The reality of what she was about to ask pressed again. Sat her chest like a weight she could barely lift. She had imagined this conversation a dozen times on the walk down, but every version vanished now, leaving only the raw pulse of desperation. "I need your help," she whispered, and immediately hated how fragile she sounded. He studied her face, his expression unreadable. What kind of help? She swallowed hard, trying to force the words past the lump in her throat. "My daughter, she is sick, very sick." She paused. The truth burned like acid in her mouth. "She is dying." The calm in his eyes flickered, replaced by something else. Curiosity, maybe pity, maybe both. "I am sorry," he said automatically. But she shook her head. "You don't understand," she whispered. "She is 6 years old. She has never known her father. He left when she was 2 days old. She thinks she will die without ever knowing what it feels like to have one." His brow furrowed, but Nora pressed on the words, tumbling out like a dam breaking. "She asked me what it feels like to have a daddy love you, and I couldn't answer. I couldn't give her that." She looked at him through tears that refused to stop. "So I am asking you, please, just for one day, pretend to be her father so she can feel it once before she goes." For a moment there was only the sound of rain hitting the glass doors. He stared at her as if she had spoken in another language. The muscles in his jaw tightened. His phone buzzed in his hand, but he didn't look away. "You want me to pretend to be your child's father?" "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Just for a few hours. She doesn't have much time left. I don't want her to leave this world thinking she was never loved by a father." His eyes softened slightly, the sharp edge of disbelief dulling into something like compassion. "What is your name?" he asked. "Nora Tate," she said, barely audible. "And your daughter Leia?" She whispered the name like a prayer. He hesitated, then extended his hand. "Marcus Hayes." The name hit her like a jolt. She had heard it before, somewhere, the kind of name printed on glossy magazines and business headlines. But at that moment, it didn't matter, wealth or fame.
Or power, none of it meant anything, only his answer did. "Please," she said again. "I know this is crazy," but she looked up at him with eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights. "Please help me." Marcus studied her face and for the first time in years felt something move inside him, not pity, something older, deeper, something that felt dangerously close to purpose. He thought of his own childhood, of the cold emptiness of a house filled with servants but not love. He thought of the father who called once a year from another country, and the mother who mistook money for affection. "How long?" he asked. "Just one afternoon," Nora said. "Long enough for her to believe it, to have that memory to take with her." Marcus glanced toward the window where the rain blurred the world into streaks of light and shadow. Something in that image, the reflection of a woman breaking yet unbroken, pushed him past hesitation. "Which room?" he asked quietly. Nora blinked. "You mean you will do it?" "Which room?" he repeated. "Pediatric ICU, room 314. Her voice trembled. "She will be suspicious at first. She is smart. She will know if you are not kind." Marcus pocketed his phone and straightened his coat. "Then lead the way," he said. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt endless. Nora stood beside him, trying not to collapse under the weight of what she had done. When the doors opened, the sterile hallway stretched before them, glowing under white lights. Each step echoed with both hope and fear. Outside room 314, Nora paused. Her Hands shaking behind the glass, Leia sat upright in bed gazing at the city lights through the rain, her small frame wrapped in hospital sheets, tubes snaking from her arms. Marcus looked once at Nora, then at the little girl, and something inside him shifted like a lock turning. He had met countless powerful people, negotiated billion-dollar deals, but nothing had ever disarmed him like the sight of that fragile child waiting for someone who would never come. Nora opened the door, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Leia, sweetheart, there is someone here I want you to meet. This is your daddy." The word hung in the air, electric, fragile. Leia's eyes widened, confusion and hope colliding as she stared at the stranger in the doorway. Marcus stepped forward slowly and smiled. "Hello, princess," he said. And in that moment, as the little girl's arms reached for him as she whispered, "Daddy," the rain outside the glass fell harder, but inside the room something finally began to heal. The room was filled with a quiet stillness. Only the sound of the rain tapping against the glass and the faint rhythm of the heart monitor broke the silence. Marcus stood frozen, his breath caught as the little girl reached for his hand. Leia's eyes shimmered with wonder, as if she had summoned a dream and it had suddenly stepped into the room. Nora watched the two of them, her chest tight with disbelief and hope all tangled together. Leia's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you really my daddy?" Marcus looked at Nora, then back at the child, and something inside him softened. He knelt beside her bed, his voice low and warm. "I am here now, princess. That is all that matters." She blinked once, twice, as if memorizing his face, then she smiled, a smile so radiant it made even the machine seem to hum lighter. Nora felt tears burn behind her eyes. She had not seen her daughter smile like that in months, not since before the doctor said the words "congenital heart failure." Leia's hand rested in Marcus's larger one, tiny and pale against his strength. For the first time in years the little girl seemed at peace. They spent hours talking as if time had stopped. Leia asked him everything. "Where do you live? What do you do? Do you like ice cream?" He answered every question with gentle patience, weaving stories that made her laugh. He told her he had once built a castle made of books. He told her he had searched the whole world for a princess who liked chocolate more than jewels, and he had finally found
Her. Leia giggled, her heart monitor picking up a soft rhythm like a lullaby. Nora sat in the corner, her heart trembling with both gratitude and guilt. She knew this was all pretend, a fragile illusion that would fade when the sun rose. But the happiness on her daughter's face made every doubt vanish. She could not remember the last time Leia had looked this alive. When the nurse entered to check the monitors, she stopped and stared at the sight of the billionaire sitting cross-legged beside a child, coloring on a notepad. No one had ever seen Marcus Hayes like this. Not the boardrooms, not the glossy magazines. He was laughing now, quietly letting Leia draw a crooked crown on his hand with a marker. It was absurd and beautiful and impossibly real. As the night deepened, Nora stepped outside to collect herself. The hallway was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. She leaned against the wall, whispering a prayer of thanks and fear. What would happen when the truth came out? What would happen when this stranger walked away, leaving her daughter with another heartbreak? She turned back toward the glass window and froze inside the room. Marcus was gently fixing the blanket around Leia, tucking her in like a man who had done it 1,000 times. She reached up and touched his cheek, whispering something Nora could not hear. He smiled and brushed a kiss on her forehead. When Nora returned inside, Marcus stood looking at the city lights through the window, his shoulders heavy. She thanked him, her voice trembling. "You did more for her in one evening than anyone ever has." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I did it for her," he said softly, "but part of me thinks I also did it for myself." The way he said it made her heart twist. There was pain behind his calm, something old and unspoken. The sound of footsteps in the hallway broke the moment a nurse approached with a folder, the results from the latest scan. Nora took them, her hands shaking. The nurse looked at her quietly before leaving. "It is getting worse," she whispered. The pressure around her daughter's heart was building faster than they expected. Nora's knees nearly buckled. Marcus caught her arm, steadying her. She wanted to say thank you, but all that came out was a broken sob. He didn't speak, just stayed beside her until her breathing slowed. His presence felt like an anchor in a storm. When they returned to the room, Leia was asleep, her small hand still clutching the crayon. The drawing on the pad showed 3 stick figures, a girl, a woman, and a tall man holding hands beneath a sun, shaped like a heart. Nora stared at it, unable to look away. Marcus's voice came low behind her. "You know she believes it now that I am her father." She turned to him, her lips trembling. I know, and that scares me because tomorrow she will wake up. And he stopped, her voice shaking. Please don't finish that sentence, he said. Let her have tonight. She needs this as much as I do. Outside the hospital, the storm raged. The lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his face for a brief second, and Nora saw something there, something fragile behind the strength. It was not pity, it was connection, maybe even fate. She did not know that in that moment. Marcus had already made a decision, one that would change everything, as he walked out into the rain. Later that night, he glanced back at the window of room 314. The light still glowed softly inside the silhouette of mother and child framed against the storm. He whispered to himself, I will not let her die. He didn't know why he said it, only that he meant it, and somewhere deep within him a man who had forgotten how to love was beginning to remember. Morning came with a quiet ache. The soft light of dawn slipped through the blinds, casting pale lines across the hospital floor. Nora sat in the chair by Leia's bed, her head heavy from a sleepless night. The memory of Marcus's promise echoed in her mind. I will not let her die. Words that sounded impossible and yet somehow felt like truth. She looked at her daughter still sleeping, her chest rising and falling with fragile rhythm. The machines hummed like a heartbeat made of electricity. Nora's hands trembled as she checked the chart. The doctors had stopped talking about recovery. They spoke now only of comfort, of making Leia's last days gentle and painless. The door opened quietly. Marcus stepped inside, dressed in a dark suit, but his eyes held something different today. Not the calm of a man used to control, but the fire of someone who had made a vow and intended to keep it. He walked to the bedside and placed a small white rose beside Leia's pillow, her favorite flower. Good morning, he said softly. Nora's voice was barely a whisper. You came back? I said I would, he replied, his tone steady, but beneath it was something raw. I didn't sleep last night, he continued. I made some calls. There is a specialist in Houston, Dr. Sofia Alvarez. She is the best in pediatric cardiology. She has an experimental surgery, a procedure that might save her. Nora's heart raced. She wanted to believe, but the word experimental sounded like hope wrapped in danger. No one here mentioned surgery anymore. They said her heart was too weak, too fragile. Marcus stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. I will take care of everything. The hospital, the transport, the cost, all of it. Just say yes. She shook her head. No, I can't accept that. It is too much. I don't even know you. You don't owe us anything. He looked at her eyes, dark with resolve. Maybe not, but I owe her something. She made me remember what it feels like to matter. Their eyes locked in silence long enough for the weight of his words to settle. Nora saw no pity there, only conviction. Still, she hesitated. What if she doesn't survive? He exhaled. Then she will have fought, knowing she wasn't alone, that she was loved. Before Nora could answer, the monitor beside Leia beeped louder. Her breathing faltered. Nurses rushed. And alarms filled the room. Panic froze Nora in place until Marcus caught her arm. Hold her hand, he said. Stay with her. His voice cut through the chaos, strong, calm, commanding. She clutched her daughter's hand, whispering, It's okay, baby. Mama's here. After endless minutes, the beeping steadied. The nurse adjusted the oxygen. Her heart is under stress, she said quietly. We have to be careful. Very careful. Marcus turned to Nora, his face pale but his voice firm. She doesn't have time to wait. Later that afternoon, they met with the doctor. The words came like cold rain. There is no guarantee. The surgery has only been done 3 times. 2 patients survived. Nora stared at the floor, tears sliding down her face. I can't risk losing her, she whispered. Marcus leaned forward, his tone low, but filled with intensity. You already are. If you do nothing. The doctor handed them papers, medical consent forms, and flight clearance for transfer. Nora's hands shook as she held them. Leia was awake now, pale but smiling when she saw Marcus. You came back, she whispered. He smiled. Of course I did. I promised, didn't I? When she coughed, he knelt beside her, brushing the hair from her face. How are you feeling? She grinned weakly. Better because you're here? He glanced at Nora and something wordless passed between them, fear and hope bound together. As evening fell, Marcus stepped outside to make another call. His driver was waiting by the curb. "The jet will be ready in 3 hours," he said over the phone. "Make sure the hospital in Houston is cleared for emergency arrival." His tone left no room for refusal. Nora watched him through the window, his silhouette framed against the glow of streetlights, a man she had known only for one night now moving heaven and earth for her child. Something inside her shifted, something she didn't want to name. When he came back in, he looked exhausted but determined. "We leave tonight," he said quietly. Nora stared at him, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this?" He paused, his answer simple. "Because someone once saved me when I didn't deserve it. Now it's my turn." Leah looked up from the bed, her voice small but clear. "Are we going on an adventure?" Nora forced a smile. "Yes, baby, we are." Marcus took her hand gently. "An adventure where we find your heart again." Outside the window, lightning flashed across the sky, thunder rolled over the city. It felt like the beginning of something unstoppable. Nora looked at Marcus standing beside her daughter, and for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of faith that maybe miracles still existed. The night sky was a blur of storm clouds and flashing lights. When the ambulance pulled onto the private runway, Nora sat inside holding Leia's hand, the child's pulse weak but steady. The sound of rain against the roof blended with the rhythm of the machines. Marcus sat across from them, silent, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the small figure lying between them. Every flicker of the monitor made his chest tighten. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Nora could barely speak. She had signed the consent forms hours ago, her hand shaking as she wrote her name. She had handed her faith to a man she barely knew, and yet somehow trusted more than anyone she had ever met. She looked at Marcus now and whispered, "You don't have to do this." He turned his gaze to her. "I already am." The plane waited sleek and silver under the storm, its lights cutting through the darkness when they boarded. Nora froze. The cabin didn't look like a jet. It looked like a small hospital. Everything gleamed white and sterile. Doctors and nurses were already inside, the best team in the country. Handpicked by Marcus himself, he moved through them with calm authority, giving orders with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. Nora realized then that he wasn't just rich, he was powerful, the kind of man who could make impossible things happen. She wondered why someone like him would care so much about a stranger's child. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something there. She couldn't name, a deep sadness, maybe, or guilt. The engines roared and the plane lifted through the rain. The city lights fell away below them. Nora held Leia close, whispering prayers she didn't even remember learning. Leia stirred, her voice faint. "Mama, is this heaven?" Nora's throat closed. "No, baby. It's just a little closer to it." Marcus sat beside them, his hand resting over Leia's tiny fingers. He spoke softly. "Do you like stories?" She nodded weakly. "Tell me one about the stars." He looked out the window where lightning painted the clouds silver. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a star that thought it was too small to shine, but one night when the world went dark, it realized its light was enough to guide someone home." Leia smiled, a fragile glow in her tired eyes. "That's a good story," she whispered. "Is it true?" "It is now," he said quietly. When she fell asleep, Nora looked at him, tears shimmering. "You tell stories like someone who's lost something." He turned toward her, his voice low. "I have lost too much: a family, a marriage, my faith in love. Once you lose enough, you stop believing in miracles until you meet someone who reminds you what they look like." Nora stared at him, words dying on her tongue. She wanted to ask who had hurt him, but the pilot's voice cut through the intercom turbulence ahead. "Hold tight." The plane jolted hard. The lights flickered. Alarms blared. Leia gasped. Marcus gripped her hand as the oxygen line slipped loose. A nurse rushed forward, reconnecting it. Nora's heart nearly stopped. After what felt like forever, the plane steadied. The doctor nodded. "She's stable for now, but we need to land soon." Marcus exhaled, his knuckles white around the seat handle, his voice calm but fierce. "Keep her alive until we touch down." 2 hours later, they landed in Houston, rain still falling like ash. Nora stepped onto the tarmac. The warm air, thick and heavy. Hospital staff waited. With a stretcher ready, Marcus walked beside her, his coat soaked through, but he didn't seem to notice. Every step he took felt like defiance against fate. Inside the ambulance taking them to the hospital, Nora finally spoke. "Thank you. Doesn't sound enough." He looked at her and said, "Don't thank me yet, not until she opens her eyes after the surgery." As they reached the hospital, Dr. Sofia Alvarez met them, her face calm but serious. She had the kind of presence that made everyone listen. She examined Leia, then looked at Marcus and Nora. "I can attempt the surgery, but her heart is too weak to wait long." "We start tonight." The words felt like thunder. Nora's legs wobbled. She turned to Marcus, her voice trembling. "What if she doesn't make it?" He reached for her hand, his touch firm, warm, unshakable. "Then we fight harder." Hours passed like ghosts. The surgical team prepared while Marcus and Nora waited in a small room outside the operating theater. She sat with her face buried in her hands, whispering prayers. Marcus watched her, something inside him unraveling. He had faced boardrooms, wars of profit and loss, but never helplessness. Not like this. The clock struck midnight when Dr. Alvarez entered, her expression unreadable. "She will need blood for the bypass machine." Marcus stepped forward without hesitation. "Use mine." The doctor hesitated. "Sir, we haven't tested compatibility." He met her gaze sharply. "Then test it now." Nora looked up, her tears glistening. "You don't have to do this." He gave her a faint smile. "Maybe I do. Maybe this is what I was meant to do all along, in that sterile room surrounded by machines and fear." Marcus Hayes, the man the world saw as untouchable, realized he was willing to bleed for a child who wasn't his by blood, but had already claimed his heart by love. As the door to the surgery room closed, Nora whispered through her tears, "Please God, don't take her away." And in that moment, she didn't know if she was praying for her daughter, or for the man who had just become part of her soul. The cold fluorescent lights of the surgical waiting room burned through Nora's eyes as the clock ticked past 2 in the morning. She sat motionless, staring at the double doors that had swallowed her daughter hours ago. Behind them, machines hummed, scalpels moved, hearts were cut open, and miracles were gambled on a knife's edge. Every passing second felt like a lifetime. Marcus stood beside the window, his back rigid, his hands buried in his pockets, but his eyes betrayed him. He was afraid. The nurse entered to collect blood results. Her voice low, her face unreadable, compatible. She said quickly, before vanishing back through the doors. Nora exhaled, trembling relief. Her fingers clenched the edge of the chair. Marcus turned toward her, his face pale, but his voice steady. "If she needs more, they'll take it," he said. "I have more to give." She looked at him, her voice a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" "Marcus." His gaze didn't waver, because when you find something worth saving, you don't walk away, even if it costs you everything. The words hit her like a quiet thunder in the sterile silence outside. A storm still raged, lightning flashing against the hospital glass. Marcus's phone buzzed on the counter, but he ignored it until the vibration wouldn't stop. Finally, he picked it up. His expression hardened at the voice on the other end. "Where are you?" "Marcus." A cold voice demanded. "The board meeting started 2 hours ago, without you. The merger is collapsing." "I don't care," he said, his voice cutting through the air like steel. "Cancel it, Marcus. You're risking billions." I said, "Cancel it," he repeated, then hung up without a second thought. Nora stared at him shocked. "You just turned down billions for this." He met her gaze with quiet finality. "I can earn money again. I can't earn another chance to save her." The next moment, a doctor rushed out, her gloves stained, her eyes tired. "She's critical. Her heart stopped once we brought her back, but she's not stable. She may not survive the 9x hour." Nora gasped. Her body went numb. Marcus moved before he could think. "Take me in there," he demanded. The doctor shook her head. "You can't, sir. It's sterile. I'm not asking permission." He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous calm. "I'm not leaving her alone. She's not just another patient to me." The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "You have 5 minutes." Inside the surgery room, the beeping machines echoed like war drums. Leia lay motionless, her chest rising faintly beneath the breathing tube. Marcus moved closer. The smell of antiseptic burned his lungs. He reached out, touching her tiny hand covered in tubes. "Hey, princess," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You remember that story about the star, the one that thought it was too small to shine? Well, I need you to shine now, just once more, okay? Because you promised you'd show me how strong you are." A tear slipped from her closed eyes. Nora watched from behind the glass, her heart shattering as Marcus whispered again, "Please come back." Suddenly, the flatline alarm screamed. The doctors yelled. Code. Blue hands moved fast. Electric paddles charged. Marcus was pulled back. The team shouted orders, one shock, then another. Nothing. Nora fell to her knees, her hands pressed against the glass. "No, please God, please don't take her." The third shock hit. Silence filled the room. The monitor beeped once. Then again, the line began to rise and fall, weak but steady. The doctor turned, breathing heavy. "We've got her." Outside the glass, Nora sobbed into her hands. Marcus stood frozen, his chest rising fast, his vision blurred with tears. He didn't remember the last time he cried, but tonight it didn't matter. Hours later, the doctor came out, her voice softer now. "She made it through the surgery. She's fragile but alive." Nora collapsed into Marcus's arms, the sound of her relief breaking the silence. "Thank you," she whispered again and again. He held her close, his voice rough. "Don't thank me yet. She still has to fight." As dawn crept through the window, Marcus stepped outside to breathe. The storm had passed, but the ground was soaked with rain, the city still sleepy. Pete, unaware that inside one hospital room a miracle had just defied death. His phone rang again. This time, a different voice. Cold familiar. It was Ethan Turner, Nora's ex. "You must be the rich hero who thinks he can save everyone," Ethan said with a sneer. "Stay out of this. She's my daughter." Marcus's jaw tightened. She stopped. "Being yours the day you walked away." Ethan's tone turned venomous. "You think money makes you her father. Wait until you see what it costs to keep her." He hung up, leaving static in the air. Marcus's eyes darkened as he looked toward the hospital door. He had fought death tonight. Now it was time to fight the living. Inside, Nora stood by her daughter's bed, unaware that a new storm was already forming, one that would test every boundary of love, sacrifice, and destiny. The morning sun crept through the hospital blinds, painting the white walls gold. Leia was still sleeping, her tiny chest rising softly to the rhythm of the monitors. Nora sat beside her bed, fingers wrapped around her daughter's hand. She should have felt peace after surviving the night, but a cold unease lingered in her chest. Something was coming. She could feel it like a storm waiting to break. The door opened quietly. Marcus stepped inside, his face pale, his expression unreadable. Nora stood instantly. "What is it?" she asked, but he said nothing at first, his jaw tight as if choosing each word carefully. "You need to know something," he said finally. "Someone called me last night, someone from your past." The name left his mouth like a knife. Ethan Turner. Nora's knees went weak. She sank into the chair, her fingers trembling. "He's back." Marcus nodded. "I don't know how he found out, but he knows about Leia, the surgery, the hospital. Everything. He wants to meet you today." Nora's voice cracked. "I don't want to see him, Marcus. He left us to die. He abandoned her when she was 2 days old." "I buried that part of my life," he said. "He's he." Her father, Marcus replied quietly, "and he's threatening legal action if we don't comply." Her breath caught. "What do you mean legal action?" "He wants custody," Marcus said flatly. "He's claiming you manipulated him years ago to hide the child. And now that she's alive and linked to my name, he wants control over both of you." Nora's heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the machines. "I won't let him take her." Marcus looked at her, his voice low and firm. "He won't. Not while I'm breathing." Before she could answer, the door opened again. A tall man stepped in with a smug smile. Expensive suit, golden cufflinks, a familiar arrogance. Nora felt her stomach twist. Ethan Turner had arrived. He looked at Leia asleep in the bed, then turned his cold eyes toward Nora and Marcus. "So this is how you spend my legacy," he sneered, "pretending to be a poor widow while my daughter lives off a billionaire." Nora stood trembling with fury. "She is not your legacy." "Ethan, she's a human being. You left her with nothing." He laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "And now she's worth millions." "Congratulations, Nora. You really learned to trade tears for money." Marcus moved before she could speak, his voice sharp. "Get out before I have you removed." Ethan smirked. I'm not going anywhere until I get what's mine. Marcus's tone dropped lower. You lost that right when you disappeared. She doesn't even know your name. Ethan's eyes flicked to Nora, then back to Marcus. She will when I'm done. The lawyers will make sure of it. The tabloids too. Your reputation will burn when they find out the billionaire savior playing daddy for pity points. Marcus took a slow step forward, his eyes dangerous. You think you can threaten me with newspapers? Ethan smiled coldly. I think money talks, and right now you're too busy playing hero to notice how fast you're bleeding it. The tension in the room thickened. Nora clutched the edge of the bed, her voice shaking. Please leave. She just survived surgery. She can't hear this. Ethan turned his gaze to the small, fragile figure in the bed. His eyes softened for a flicker, then hardened again. She's mine, Nora whispered. No, she's mine. Before he could respond, Marcus spoke quietly, but every word carried power. If you file that case, I'll fight you with everything I have. You'll lose everything. Ethan's lips curled. Then let's see who's willing to lose more. He walked out, his laughter echoing through the corridor. The silence that followed felt like a wound. Nora collapsed into the chair, her body trembling. Marcus knelt beside her, his voice low. I won't let him take her from you. I swear on everything I have. She looked at him, tears spilling. She's all I have, Marcus, and now he's going to destroy everything. He took her hand and said, Then marry me. Nora froze. Her heart stopped. You don't mean that. He held her gaze steady. I do. It's the only way. If we marry, I gain parental authority, and he can't challenge her custody without tearing himself apart in court. Her mind spun. Marriage legal protection scandal. It sounded insane, but Leia's faint breathing behind her reminded her of what was at stake. Marcus whispered softly, This isn't about pretending anymore. Not for me. I would rather be her real father in every way that matters. Nora felt the walls close in around her. Part of her wanted to run. Part of her wanted to believe him. Marcus stood waiting, patient and unyielding. Marry me today, he said before he finds another way to take her. She looked at her daughter's pale face, then at the man who had bled for her, who had defied death for her heart pounding. She whispered, Yes. As the sun climbed higher over the hospital windows, Nora Tate agreed to a marriage born from desperation, but destined for something far greater outside in the hallway. Ethan Turner stood listening, a smile of venom spreading across his lips. He had just lost one battle, but he was already planning the next one. The hospital chapel was quiet, filled with the faint scent of lilies and the hum of fluorescent lights. Nora stood at the small altar, her hands shaking. The simple white dress borrowed from a nurse clung to her trembling frame. Marcus stood beside her, dressed in the same dark suit he had worn through every sleepless night. His tie loosened his face, pale from exhaustion, yet his eyes held steady conviction. There were no guests, no music, no rings, only the silence of two souls doing what they must to protect the child sleeping upstairs. The priest cleared his throat softly, his voice echoing in the empty room. This union, though unconventional, is recognized by law. Do you, Marcus Hayes, take Nora Tate to be your lawful wife? Marcus's answer came without hesitation. I do. And do you, Nora Tate, take Marcus Hayes to be your lawful husband? Her voice cracked, but she managed to whisper, I do. The priest nodded, then with quiet solemnity pronounced them husband and wife. Marcus reached for her hand and squeezed it gently, not out of ceremony, but promise. Nora blinked away the tears blurring her vision. She wanted to believe this was more than protection, more than paperwork. But fear whispered otherwise. When they stepped outside the chapel, reporters were already waiting. Flashes exploded through the hallway, microphones shoved forward. Mr. Hayes, is it true you married a woman you met in a hospital? Is this a publicity stunt? Nora flinched as one shouted, Is the child really yours? Marcus's arm went around her protectively, his voice calm but sharp. My personal life is not for your headlines. She stumbled against him, the world spinning as more cameras appeared. Security pushed them back, but the damage was done. Her secret was no longer secret. By evening, every channel carried the story. Billionaire marries single mother inside hospital. Emergency questions about inheritance, custody, and hidden motives filled the air. Ethan Turner watched from his hotel suite, a glass of whiskey in hand, a smirk twisting his mouth. So the great Marcus Hayes wants to play family man. Fine. Let's see how long love lasts when the world turns against him. Back at the hospital, Marcus paced the room, his phone buzzing nonstop, his lawyers, his board, his shareholders all demanding answers. But none of it mattered when he looked at Leia, sleeping peacefully. The storm outside the walls felt small. Nora sat nearby, her face pale from stress. "We just made things worse," she whispered. "The whole world will think we used you." He knelt beside her. "No, they'll think what I want them to think. I'll control the narrative." He smiled faintly. "That's what I do." A knock came at the door. Dr. Alvarez entered, her expression grave. "She's stable for now, but her heart is struggling to adjust to the new rhythm. The next 48 hours will decide if she survives." Nora covered her mouth, the tears returning. Marcus rose slowly, his jaw tightening. "Tell me what you need," she hesitated. "We might need to move her to a more isolated recovery unit. She's too exposed here. Too much attention from the press." Minutes later, the sound of sirens outside grew louder. Protesters had gathered, some accusing Marcus of buying sympathy, others defending him. Journalists shouted questions through megaphones. The hospital turned into chaos. Security escorted them through the back entrance as flashes of cameras followed. In the dark corridor, Nora stopped, unable to move. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I never wanted this attention." Marcus turned to her, his voice softer than she expected. "I know, but you have to remember why we did this. It's not for them, it's for her." She looked up into his eyes and saw something real behind the calm. Not power, not control, but fear. The same fear she carried every day. Later that night, Marcus sat by Leia's bedside, her little hand wrapped around his thumb. She stirred in her sleep, whispering, "Daddy, are you still here?" He leaned closer, his voice barely above a breath. "Always. Princess, always." Nora stood in the doorway, watching the man who had once been a stranger, now guard. In her daughter like his own, she felt her heart break and heal all at once, but the peace lasted only moments because down the hallway, Ethan arrived with a lawyer by his side, demanding access to his daughter. The nurse tried to stop him, but he pushed past. "I have legal rights," he barked. "You can't keep me from her." Marcus stepped into the hallway, his voice low, dangerous. "You have no rights here." Ethan smirked. "She's my blood. That's all that matters." "Not anymore," Marcus replied. "Now she carries my name." Ethan's eyes darkened. "You think a piece of paper makes you her father? You'll regret this." Nora appeared behind Marcus, her voice steady. "You regret leaving her, and now you're only back because you smell money." Ethan's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he hissed, walking away, but Marcus knew he was right. It wasn't over. When the night deepened, Nora sat beside Marcus, watching the moonlight fall across the bed, the soft beeping of the monitor, the faint rhythm of Leia's heart. She whispered, "Will she ever know what we've done for her?" Marcus looked at the sleeping child, then at Nora, his voice heavy with truth. "She'll know that love is the only thing that ever mattered." But neither of them saw the shadow moving down the corridor, a figure with a camera and a voice recorder slipping through the staff door. Ethan's spy had just captured everything: the secret marriage, the child, the whispered confession. By morning, the world would know, and the storm would no longer be outside. It would be inside their lives, tearing everything apart. The morning broke with chaos. Sirens blared outside the hospital and voices rose in a storm of accusation. Nora woke to the sound of shouting from the hallway and the flash of camera lights bursting through the blinds. Marcus was already on the phone, his expression sharp and cold, his voice cutting through the noise handle. "It now. I don't care what it costs. Make it disappear." Nora hurried to the window. The street below was flooded with reporters, their faces pressed against the glass doors. Microphones, Ized headlines were already running across screens. Billionaire's secret hospital marriage exposed. The voice of a nurse cracked through the chaos. "Mr. Hayes." Someone leaked the footage. Nora's stomach dropped. She remembered the shadow last night moving near the door. Someone had been watching them. Marcus turned to her, his face pale but calm. "Nora, listen to me. They will twist everything. They will call you a gold digger, and me a liar. You can't talk to them, not a word. I don't care what they say about me, she said, trembling, but they'll ruin Leia. They'll make her a story instead of a child. He moved closer, his voice lower and fiercer than she had ever heard. I won't let that happen. She's my daughter now too, and no one touches her without going through me. Before Nora could respond, the door burst open. Ethan walked in, flanked by 2 men in suits and a woman holding a document folder. His grin was cruel. Morning, newlyweds, he said, holding up the papers. I thought I'd drop by with the custody order. Nora froze, her pulse racing. What have you done? Ethan smiled. I told you this isn't over. I have the right to see my daughter, and since you're busy pretending to be a happy family, I thought the law should remind you who her real father is. Marcus stepped forward, his tone cold. Leave before I forget how to be civil. Ethan laughed. Civil? You mean before you remind everyone that this is just a marriage of convenience? The cameras outside are dying to know how long your little fairy tale will last. Nora's voice shook. You sold this story, didn't you? Ethan's grin widened. Of course I did. Information is currency, and you married into a fortune that belongs to me. Marcus's eyes turned dark, his voice a whisper. I will destroy you if you hurt her. Ethan stepped closer, unafraid. You can try, but once this hits the courts, you'll be nothing more than a headline, and he gestured to Nora, will be your biggest mistake. Before the argument could continue, Dr. Alvarez ran into the room, her voice urgent. Stop this. Now she's waking up. Leia's heartbeat is unstable. Everyone froze. The noise outside faded to silence as the machines inside the room began to scream. Nora ran to her daughter's side. Leia's small body trembled, her chest rising unevenly, her voice faint. Mommy. Nora grabbed her hand, tears streaming. Baby, I'm here. It's okay. Marcus rushed forward, pressing the call button for help. Doctors and nurses flooded in. The monitor flashed red, oxygen levels dropping fast. Dr. Alvarez shouted for medication. Nora's heart pounded. She could feel the life slipping from her daughter's fingers. Marcus whispered, Hold on, princess. Don't let go. Then the room went still. The monitor flatlined the sound. A knife through the air. Nora screamed, No, not again, please, not again. Marcus's hands gripped the bed frame, his knuckles white. The doctors worked frantically. Compressions, adrenaline, shock after shock. Nora's sobs echoed against the sterile walls. Marcus turned away, his body shaking, every part of him breaking. And then a sound, a soft, fragile beep. Then another, and another. The monitor began to blink, faint but steady. Nora gasped, covering her mouth. The doctors stepped back, relief washing over their faces. Dr. Alvarez looked at them. She's stabilizing. Marcus dropped to his knees beside the bed, his forehead resting against her hand. Thank you, God, he whispered. Thank you. Nora reached for him. Their hands met over the sleeping child, and for a moment, nothing else existed. No headlines, no threats, no fear. Only the fragile heartbeat that tied them all together. But the peace didn't last. The door cracked open again. Ethan stood there, watching, silent. For the first time, his eyes unreadable, he looked at the child, then at Marcus, then left without a word, his footsteps fading down the corridor. Marcus stood, his face hardening. This won't stop until I end it. Later that night, Nora sat by the window, her reflection pale against the glass. Marcus entered quietly, his sleeve as rolled up his face, weary but determined. I spoke to the lawyers, he said quietly. Ethan won't win, not legally, not morally, but there's one more thing he doesn't know. What? Marcus's eyes softened. The marriage is real now. Nora, I'm not walking away after this. Not ever. She stared at him, unable to speak the words she had buried for weeks, rising like a tide. Why me? Why us? He stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. Because you reminded me what it means to love without expecting anything back. Outside, the thunder rolled again, rain streaking down the window. Nora leaned into his chest, the sound of Leia's soft breathing steady in the background. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe love could survive storms, even the ones born from lies and loss. But down the hall, Ethan stopped before the elevator. A man in a dark coat handed him a folder. Inside were photos and documents with Marcus's signature across them. Ethan's lips curled into a thin smile. So he has secrets too, he whispered. This time I'll make sure the whole world burns with him. The night was heavy with rain, thunder rolling over the city like the sound of something breaking apart inside the storm. Nora couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the monitors flashing red. She saw the line go flat. She heard her daughter's last breath over and over until the sound became a nightmare that refused to end. She rose from the chair and walked to the window. Lightning split the sky in two, illuminating the empty hallway outside the glass. Something in her heart whispered that this calm was only an illusion. Marcus was still awake, sitting at the small table, his laptop open, his jaw tight, his phone filled with messages from lawyers, board members, and reporters. The fallout from their secret marriage had spread across the world, but he didn't care about that anymore. He cared only about the two people sleeping in this room. Nora turned toward him, her voice soft. "What are you doing?" He looked up, his eyes tired but alive, planning. He said, "Ethan won't stop until he gets what he wants. I'm going to make sure what he wants no longer exists." Before Nora could speak, the door opened. Dr. Alvarez entered, her coat damp from the storm, her expression serious. "I just reviewed Leia's scans," she said. "Her heart is stronger than we thought, but she needs rest. No more stress, no more media, and definitely no visitors." She paused, hesitating before adding, "I've arranged for her to be transferred to a secure facility where no one can reach her, not even Ethan." Nora's relief was immediate. "Do it," she said, "whatever it takes." But they were too late. Ethan was already moving, his plan unfolding quietly while the storm covered his trail. He had the folder, the proof that Marcus's empire was not as perfect as it seemed, documents showing a buried scandal from years before, a deal that cost innocent lives. If exposed, it would destroy Marcus and everything he'd built. Ethan's voice echoed in the darkness as he spoke to his lawyer. "If I can't take the girl, I'll take everything he loves." The next morning, the headlines changed. Billionaire accused of cover-up charity funds, missing from Hayes Foundation. Nora saw the words on a nurse's phone and felt her chest tighten. Marcus appeared moments later, his face pale but controlled. "It's a lie," he said, "but they'll believe it." He reached for her hand. "I need you to trust me. We're going to fix this together." Hours later, they were escorted from the hospital by security. Reporters shouted questions, the sky above heavy and gray. Nora held Leia close, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Everything will be okay." But inside she wasn't sure. They drove in silence to a small private estate outside the city, surrounded by trees and guarded by silence. It felt safe, but fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. That night, Nora found Marcus outside, standing under the rain, his shirt clinging to him, his hands shaking. "I thought I could protect you," he said, his voice break. "I thought love was enough, but I was wrong. Ethan's destroying everything and it's my fault." She stepped closer, her hands on his face. "No, it's not. Love isn't the weakness. It's the weapon he doesn't have." Before he could answer, headlights appeared in the distance, a car tearing up the driveway. Marcus's security rushed forward, but Ethan emerged first, soaked through, holding something in his hand, papers waving in the wind. "It's over," he shouted. "I have proof you lied to everyone. Marcus, you're finished." Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady. "You came for attention, Ethan, but you forgot something." He turned to Nora, who stood holding Leia in her arms. "Love doesn't break under pressure. It becomes unbreakable." Ethan laughed bitterly. "We'll see about that." He moved forward but suddenly stopped as Leia's small voice cut through the rain. "Stop fighting, please, both of you." Everyone froze. She was standing barefoot on the porch, her hospital gown fluttering, her hand pressed over her chest, her voice shaking. "I don't want hate anymore. I just want peace." She looked at Ethan with eyes too wise for her age. "You left me when I was a baby, but I forgive you because I have a daddy now who never leaves." Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. He looked at her small, fragile form, and for the first time, something cracked in his face. Shame. Marcus stepped closer, his voice quiet. "Leave Ethan before I make you regret coming back." Ethan hesitated, then dropped the papers, letting them fall into the wet grass. The rain washed away the ink. The evidence gone, his voice was hollow. You win, Hayes, but someday you'll understand what losing feels like. He turned and disappeared into the storm. Weeks passed slowly like the world was learning to breathe again. The media storm faded, the truth about Ethan's lies spread, and the world began to see Marcus not as a villain, but as a man who fought for love above all else. Leah recovered fulls. Her laughter filling the new home that Marcus and Nora built together in the countryside. Her heart strong, her smile bright like a promise kept. One evening, as the sun set across the hills, Marcus stood on the porch, watching Nora and Leah chase fireflies across the garden. Nora turned and called out, "Come join us." He smiled and walked toward them, wrapping his arms around both of them. As the first stars began to shine, Leah looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "Mama, remember when I said I wanted to know what it feels like to have a daddy love me? Now I know." Nora's eyes filled with tears. Marcus kissed the top of her head. "You taught me how to be one princess." Years later, people would still talk about their story, the woman who begged a stranger to pretend to be her daughter's father, and the man who gave up everything to make that lie real, and in their quiet home, filled with laughter and light. Marcus and Nora Hayes knew that love wasn't something you found by chance. It was something you chose to fight for again and again, until even the broken hearts learned to beat as one.